Hello, growers. Looking to turn your homestead into a profitable business? Or are you a farmer looking to boost your sales? Check out my book, Sell Everything You Grow. This book is the ultimate guide to choosing the right farm business model that fits your farm, time, and location. Discover which model has the highest profit margins and why diversification is so important. Whether you're selling apples, vegetables, or microgreens, Sell Everything You Grow will help you find your first market or expand into new ones. Get Sell Everything You Grow on Amazon and start selling more today. For some consumers, people listening to this, they get it. They want to support the practices for many reasons. They want to support the growers doing these things because they view that work as important. They know that what the grower is doing on the land is important. They view it as a health measure, that they're getting a cleaner food. You talked previously about the importance of soil and human health, that connection for consumers who, let's say, you didn't even care about the regenerative effects. I just care about what it's going to do to my body. What would be your case to say support producers who grow food like this because it will help your body for these reasons?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's in some ways, the most compelling reason. I think that there's definitely a lot we know about the impacts of our current approach to agricultural management on the quality of water. We see eutrophication in dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, for instance. On quantity of water, we see the draining of aquifers, and obviously water is a cycle, but in terms of clean water, we know that it impacts air. We've seen, for instance, specifically in California, the effects of tillage on what's called particulate matter, or the dust that goes airborne, and then you're breathing that in. There's the rates of allergic rhinitis and allergies in the Central Valley of California are through the roof, and potentially that is a big part of why. And so I think we know about some of these negative impacts that agriculture can have on the environment. I think that we're still just learning about the regenerative effects, like how we can actually turn the clock back on those things. And one, I think there's a lack of certainty, both in what we were talking about before, because soils and landscapes are so diverse. What are the practices that are going to lead to those regenerative outcomes? And two, what's the sort of magnitude or actual potential for those outcomes? Are you going to increase it 10%, or could you increase things 50%? I think there's still a lot to learn in that way. But I think the human health benefits of eating fresh fruits and vegetables is indisputable, for one. So even if we just start there at that layer, like most of the American diet comes from five crops, right? And those crops typically go into processed food items, right? So it's like wheat, soy, corn, rice. I'm going to draw a blank on the fifth. The diversity of our diets matches the diversity of our landscapes, right? And so even if you look at it from the most basic level of, if we promote diversification in our agricultural systems, it will lead to diversification of our diets and larger consumption of fruits and vegetables. We already know. In fact, that's one of the few things we really do unequivocally know from a nutritional science perspective, is that increasing the consumption of fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables especially, is correlated with lower incidence of morbidity and mortality, less likely to die at a young age.
Right.
And so that's one. The other thing, though, is the nutrient density of that food that you're eating. So it's not just about calories in, calories out. You also want those calories to be enriched, so to speak, with a diversity of essential nutrients. And we have seen they've tried to approach it from the perspective of organic versus conventional, and had a really hard time coming up with actual trends or relationships. I think back to this soil's very diverse perspective, you're not always comparing apples to oranges. Maybe you're comparing apples to apples in the sense that you're actually comparing apples, but it's actually apples to oranges, because maybe this apple was grown in a very fertile soil, and this apple was grown in a very old, kind of leached out, not very nutrient rich soil. And you really, if you're going to look at the difference in nutrient density by management, you really have to control or constrain for soil type. And so when they've done that, They have shown that there is a difference in the nutrient density with when a crop is grown in a soil that has a higher what's called organic matter content. And so organic matter is basically the dead, almost dead, kind of recycled organic materials from the soil. Maybe it came from plant matter or animal waste or the dead body of an insect or something like that. And as it's cycling through the soil, it forms, some of it sticks around as what's called organic matter. Organic matter is about 50%, 60% carbon, and the rest is the suite of plant essential nutrients. And so when you have more organic matter in your soil, there's a number of benefits you get: more water holding capacity, more buffering capacity with temperature, more diversity of organisms, all sorts of things. But we've also seen that there's a higher level of nutrient density in the crops grown in a higher organic matter soil, which makes sense because that organic matter is providing nutrients to those plants to grow. We've also seen when you have more, and this kind of does trend with organically managed systems, but when you have a larger population of what's called mycorrhizal fungi. So mycorrhizal fungi connect the plant roots to resources in the soil. They can help increase the access to water, to nutrients, and things of that nature. And we've also seen both greater nutrient uptake and also a lower uptake of heavy metals when you have a higher population of mycorrhizal fungi. And so they're potentially mediating a little bit what's going into the plant, making sure that it takes in the nutrients it needs, and that it doesn't take in too many of the ones that we don't want. And so all this to say, I think that we know that management affects the nutrition of the plants. We don't know how much, we don't know how it affects it everywhere, but we have a general idea of that relationship. The other thing I would say is just black box that we really know nothing about is the microbial relationship. And when you're eating food that has been heavily pasteurized, it's been sitting on a shelf for who knows how long before it even makes its way into your refrigerator versus something you've just picked off the vine or that you've gotten at the farmer's market and was harvested that morning. Just freshness alone actually greatly affects the nutrient density of a crop, but also what else is there that we don't know about in terms of microbial inoculation. Like microbes on the things that we eat would be one of the ways that we would inoculate our bodies. And we've put a giant wall in between that connection, right? Because food gets so heavily cleaned and pasteurized before it gets to us. And there's reasons why, and there's arguments for why that could be a good thing, but there's also trade-offs with anything. And so we've lost some of that connection and some of that relationship to our own microbiome. And then the final thing is just exposure to contaminants. We know that there can be responsible ways to use pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, and apply them in ways and with timing such that it's less likely that you're going to have residues when it comes time to eat the plant. But that said, there are varying levels of toxicity and persistence for the pesticides that are approved for use in agriculture. And regardless of how we may aspire to manage to prevent those from making their way to the food that we buy in the store, plenty of tests have shown, there's been plenty of studies as of recent that have shown pesticide residues on almost everything. And yeah, I think just even that exposure, to the extent that you can limit that exposure, the better. Importantly, though, it's not just about our own exposure when we're eating it, it's about the exposure of the farm workers who are applying it. And yeah, I think from a health perspective, there's a number of reasons why we are what we eat, right? And that food is literally information that in quote unquote forms our body, right? And the more nutrient dense, the fewer toxic compounds, the better that food is going to fuel and nourish our bodies.
Today's episode is brought to you by Modern Grower, a proud retailer of the Sumi Soaker system. The Sumi Soaker system is an irrigation game changer. It offers multiple advantages for market gardeners. Even gentle watering without dry spots common with wobblers. The system is lightweight and portable, so you can use it with quick rotation crops. It's low maintenance with no parts to break or clog. It's versatile. You can use it for direct seeding, transplants, and cover crops. And it's very cost effective compared to overhead options. And maybe one of its best and most unique features is it can put down water in a rectangular pattern which is very different than rotating sprinklers that leave circular patterns, often with dry corners and overwatered centers. If you want to learn more about the Sumi Soaker system, use the link below or visit us at shop.moderngrower.co.